Good morning students. This is 12th standard botany video class, video 7. In this video, we are going to continue the lesson Principles of Ecology. Dear students, in the previous video class, we have seen biotic factor. That means the interaction between the living organism such as plants and animals are called biotic factor. Based upon the positive interaction and the negative interaction, the biotic factors are divided into positive interaction, again divided into mutualism and commensalism. Next one is the negative interaction. It's divided into different types: predation, parasitism, competition and amensalism. Then also we have seen interspecific interaction and co-evolutionary dynamics. So for this we have seen different co-evolutionary dynamics. One is the mimicry, another one is the myrmecophily, last one is the co-evolution. Up to this only we have seen in the previous video class. Now we are going to see the different types of ecological adaptation in this video. See the topic ecological adaptation. That means all organism or individual organism which are modifying their structure and their characteristic feature to survive successfully in a particular environment is known as adaptation. That means to increase their life activities, they are changing their structure and character to survive in the particular environment is known as adaptations. So these adaptations are help the organism to survive in the different ecological habitat. Dear students, based on the different habitat, what is the habitat? Living place of an organism. The adaptation of the organism is also divided into different forms. One is hydrophytes. That means plants which are living in the water is known as hydrophytes. Xerophytes, plants which are living in the land region, that means desert region, is known as xerophytes. Next one, mesophytes, plants which are living in the terrestrial region with a sufficient amount of water is known as mesophytes. Another one, epiphytes, plants which are living on the trees is known as epiphytes. Halophytes, plants which are living in the extreme salt condition is known as halophytes. So these are all the different plants. Ecological adaptation based on the living place, that means habitat. Dear students, the first ecological adaptation is hydrophytes. So what is hydrophytes? Hydro means water, phytes means plants. So plants which are living in the water or wet places are called hydrophytes. The hydrophytes is also divided into different types based on the relation to water and air. Based on the relation to water and air. The different types of hydrophytes are free floating hydrophytes. That means plants which are freely floating on the surface of the water is known as free floating hydrophytes. Second one, rooted floating hydrophytes. That means part of a plant which are attached to the bottom of the soil, that means at the bottom of the water. Then remaining part of the plants are freely floating. That is said to be rooted floating hydrophytes. Next one, submerged floating hydrophytes. Part of a plant attached to the bottom of the soil, and part of a plant which is submerged under the water. That means plant parts which are merged under the water is known as submerged floating hydrophytes. Next one, rooted submerged hydrophytes. Here is different from the submerged floating hydrophytes. So submerged floating hydrophytes means plants, they are not attached to the bottom of the water. They are located the middle position of the water, not in the topmost water level or at the bottom of the level. In the middle region of the bottom only they are floating. That is submerged. Rooted means partly they are attached to the bottom of the soil and partly submerged the hydrophytes or in the water. Next one, amphibious. Part of the plant which are present below the water or inner side of the water. Part of a plant part which are located above the water level. That is said to be amphibious hydrophytes. So these are all the different types. First we are going to see free floating hydrophytes. See the first line, the plants which are freely floating on the surface of the water. That means they are contact with the water and the air, but not with the soil. Underline the word, this is very, very important. Freely floating means they are contact between the water and the air, but not in the soil. Example, Eichhornia, Pistia and Wolffia. Wolffia is the smallest flowering plants, is the important 1 mark question. Dear students, see the diagram. This is the example of free floating hydrophytes. See the contact between the plant parts are water and air. They are not attached to the soil. So the contact is taken place between water and air. That type of hydrophytes is known as free floating hydrophytes. Example, Eichhornia, Pistia. So the first diagram is said to be the Pistia. The second one is the Eichhornia. In your book it's wrongly given that one. Eichhornia, in Tamil it is known as Vengaya Tamarai or Agaya Tamarai. The pot is also given here. The leaves are look like spongy nature, that is filled with air. So they are floating on the surface, that is said to be floating leaves. The stem is also hollow. The stem of the weak stemmed plant, this is all the subaerial modification stem. You already studied in 11th standard. The one of the type is stolon. Then cluster of roots are arising from the node region. The type of the root is fibrous root system. At the tip of each root, they contains root packet. With the help of this root packet only, they are freely floating on the surface of the water. See the another diagram, second one, that is Eichhornia. The stem type is known as offset. This is also one of the best example of free floating Hydrophytes. The second type is rooted floating hydrophytes. So in this type of hydrophytes, plants are fixed into the mud region, that means seru, okay. But the leaves and flowers are floating on the surface of the water. For example, lotus, okay. And also another one is the lily. So these plants are contact with the soil, water and air. First one, they are contact with only water and air, but not with the soil. But second one, they are contact with the water, air and soil. Example, Nilambo and Nymphea. So Nilambo means lotus, Nymphea that means lily, alichedi. Then Potamogeton and Marsilia. So these are the example of rooted floating hydrophytes. Dear students, some of the points is given in the box column. Lotus seed showing the highest longevity in plant kingdom. That means the seeds of the lotus only having the highest lifespan, that means life cycle. The age of the seed of lotus is very long period. So that's why they given the more to know points. So one more question. Which seeds of the plant kingdom showing the highest longevity? Example, lotus seed. Then the third type is submerged floating hydrophytes. Here the plants are not contact with the air and also not contact with the soil. They are only contact with the water only. That type of hydrophytes is known as submerged floating hydrophytes. Example, Ceratophyllum and Utricularia. These two plants are example of submerged floating hydrophytes. That means the plants are completely submerged in the water. At the same time, they are not contact with the water and contact with the air and soil. Example, Ceratophyllum and Utricularia. Dear students, see the diagram. Nilambo is the example of lily flower. Nymphea is the binomial name of lotus. Okay. So first one, example of a rooted and floating hydrophytes. See, the stem portion of a lotus flower is attached to the mud of the water. The stem is known as rhizome, that is underground buried stem portion is known as rhizome, which contains adventitious root. With the help of this root only, they are attached to the mud region. So, they are contact with the soil. Then, part of a plant pots is contact with the water. Then the leaf flowers are located above the water level. That means they are contact with the air. So second one is also like that, the same one, Marsilia, that is known as Arakira in Tamil, is a pteridophytic plant. Dear students, in this Marsilia, the stem is also known as rhizome. From the node of the stem, cluster of roots are raised. They are attached to the mud region. So they contact with the soil. Then the stem portion, which are contact with the water, and the leaf portion only contact with the air. So the stalk of the leaf is known as petiole. Young leaves are look like in the form of coiled nature. That is said to be succinate vernation. So these two are the example of rooted floating hydrophytes. See the next diagram, submerged floating hydrophytes. First one ceratophyllum, second one Etricularia. It is an example of insectivorous plants or otherwise known as bladderwort. This is the hydrophytic plants. Plants are totally submerged. That means they are not contact with the air and soil. They contact only with the water. So those plants are known as submerged floating hydrophytes. Example, ceratophyllum and Utricularia. Dear students, next type is rooted submerged hydrophytes. Dear students, these plants are completely submerged in the water. That means they are not contact with the air, but they are contact with only water and soil. That is said to be rooted submerged hydrophytes. Example, Hydrilla, Vallisneria and Isotus. Next one, amphibious hydrophytes or rooted emergent hydrophytes. So these plants are adapted for both aquatic and terrestrial mode of habitat. Aquatic means they need sufficient amount of water and also they need terrestrial mode of adaptation. They need sufficient amount of water, I told you, isn't it? That's why they grow in shallow water. Example, Ranunculus, Typha and Sagittaria. Another one, Hydrophytes. Important, 2 mark question. That means plants which can grow in moist, damp. Moist means only very, very little amount of water and also shady places are called hydrophytes. Example, Habenaria is a kind of orchid. Mosses is the bryophyte. So these plants are known as hydrophytes. These plants can grow in moist, damp and shady places known as hydrophytes. Dear students, see the diagram is the rooted submerged hydrophytes. See that one. These plants are not contact with the air but contact with the water and soil. The stem type is known as weak stem, that means stolon type, subaerial modification, adventitious roots attach to the mud or a soil. They are producing 2 types of plant, male plant and the female plant. Male plant produce male flower, female plant produce female flower. So the pollination is taken place in water. That is said to be hydrophily. Another one, Hydrilla. Here also the stem is look like subaerial modification, stolon, rhizome or any kind of a type with a produced branched stem with leaves. The leaves are totally submerged in the water. So these plants contact with the soil and water, not with the air, is another example of rooted submerged hydrophytes. Example, Hydrilla. Dear students, see the diagram. This is the example of a rooted emergent hydrophytes. That means amphibious plants, otherwise known as heterophily. So what is heterophily? Hetero means different. Phylum means leaves. So the plants which are showing are having 2 types of leaves. That is known as heterophily. See the first diagram, Sagittaria. The stem is attached to that is buried in the soil. Roots are fixed to the mud region. There are 2 types of leaf is there. One is the submerged leaves, which is globose in structure. Another leaf is triangle in shape, which is emergent leaf, which is located out of the water. The flower is also located out of the water. So these plants which need both aquatic and terrestrial mode of life, that is known as rooted emergent hydrophytes. Second one is also another example for rooted emergent hydrophytes. Example, ranunculus. Here also they are having two type of leaves. Submerged leaves are dissected leaves. That means they are showing number of divisions, look like our palm. Then the emergent leaves are look like in the form of elongated shape, that is known as emergent or aerial leaves. They look like in the form of tubular shape. So this is said to be the two type of leaves which is present in the amphibious hydrophytes or rooted emergent hydrophytes. So these are all the different types of hydrophytes with the example. Is the important 5-mark question. Kindly note down in your textbook. Dear students, up to this we have seen the classification of hydrophytes. Now we are going to see the different ecological adaptation. So the adaptation is also differentiated into different form. One is based on the external character, that is morphological adaptation, internal character, that is anatomical adaptation, and also functional character, that is said to be physiological adaptation. First, we are going to see the morphological adaptations of hydrophytes. That means external modification of a character or organ to adapt in the particular environment. First one, in Wolffia plant, roots are totally absent. In Salvia plant, the roots are poorly developed. Roots are totally absent in Wolffia and Salvinia. Poorly developed in Hydrilla. And well developed in ranunculus. So root is an external organ or vegetative organ. They are showing some variation. Some plants it is absent. In some plant it is poorly developed. In some one it is well developed roots. Next one, normally in the land plants, the root tips are covered by a root cap, isn't it? But these root caps are absent in the hydrophytic plants. The root caps are replaced by root pocket. With help of this root pocket only, the plants are floating on the surface of the water. Example, Eichhornia. So that is the morphological character of root in hydrophytes. Second one, stem. The stems are long, slender, that means no branches, only one, slender, spongy, that means filled with air, and flexible in submerged form. Flexible, it can able to bend upside and low side on either side, lateral side. That is said to be flexible in submerged forms. Another one, the free floating forms are, the stem is thick, short, the type of the stem is stolon, and spongy, that means filled with what is that one? Air. In rotated floating forms, the stem is known as rhizome. So free floating means that it's said to be stolon type. In the rooted floating form means it is a rhizome. Then these stems are responsible for vegetative propagation, that is reproduction. So the different types of stem which is present in the water plant, they are responsible for vegetative reproduction, that is runners, stolon, stem and root cuttings, tubers, dormant apices. So dormant means resting stage. Apices means apex, at the tip of the root, stem and the leaf, which are having the apical meristem. So these apical meristems are taking some resting period is known as dormant. During favorable season, they are gives rise to new individual and offset. So these are all the different stem and root cuttings which are responsible for the vegetative propagation. Next one, leaves. Leaves are very thin or needle-like, long. Sometimes it may be ribbon shaped in Vallisneria, or long and linear, that means triangle shape in Potamogeton, and finally dissected in Ceratophyllum, that means look like palm with fingers, that is said to be dissected in Ceratophyllum. Another one, in some of the free floating plants, leaves are large and also flat. Example, Nymphea and Nilampo, lotus and lily. In Eichhornia and Trappa, the stalk of a leaf is known as petiole, becomes swollen, that means bulged, and look like spongy nature, soft nature, filled with air. So that is another type of leaves. In some of the emergent form, emergent means rooted emergent hydrophytes, amphibious plant, okay. In emergent forms, the leaves are shows the heterophily types. That means two types of leaves are present. Submerged leaves are in the form of dissected one. That means different branches. Branches means look like a palm with a finger. And the aerial leaves are entire. That means normal leaf. Example, Ranunculus, Limnophila, Heterophylla and Sagittaria. So this are all the different morphological characteristic adaptation of stem, root and leaves of hydrophytes. Next we are going to see anatomical adaptation. Dear students, the internal structure of a hydrophytic plants, the cuticle is completely absent. If it is present means they are look like very thin and also poorly developed. Then epidermis is only one layer. There is single layer of epidermis is present in the anatomical character. Dear students, the cortex is well developed, but between the cells, number of air spaces is there. So air-filled parenchyma, which is present in the cortex, is known as parenchyma. Vascular tissues such as xylem and phloem are poorly developed. But in the emergent form of a hydrophytic plants, the vascular tissue system are well developed. Mechanical tissue system, that is sclerenchyma cells and cholenchyma cells are absent. But in some emergent forms, they contains mechanical tissues. Pith cells normally made up of with parenchyma only, pith or medulla. But in hydrophytes, pith cells are made up of with sclerenchymatous cells. So these are all the different anatomical characters of hydrophytes. See the diagram. This is the TS of hydrilla stem. The diagram is very important for diagrammatic question. The outermost layer, single layer, made up of with elongated parenchymatous cell known as epidermis. Below the epidermis, two layers of closely packed cells known as hypodermis. From that hypodermis, elongated cells are present in the cortex in a radial manner. Between the radial elongated cells, a chamber filled with air is known as air chambers. So this region which constitute the cortex of the hydrophytic plants. The innermost layer of the cortex is known as endodermis, single layer, closely packed, barrel-shaped parenchymatous cell. Inner to the endodermis, a single layer of pericycle is present. Xylem is present in the inner side of the pericycle. Then the phloem is also alternates the xylem, which consists of two types of phloem cells. One is the sieve tube and one is the phloem parenchyma. So this is said to be the TS of hydrilla stem. Next one, physiological adaptations of hydrophytes. So these hydrophytes have the ability, that means capacity, to withstand in the anaerobic condition, that means in the absence of oxygen also, they can able to survive in the particular environment. So for that, they possess some kind of special aerating organs to survive in the anaerobic condition. So these are all the different morphological, anatomical and physiological adaptations of hydrophytes. Is an important book back question and also important 5-mark question. Dear students, up to this we have seen different types of hydrophytes and their characteristic feature with the example, and also we have seen morphological, anatomical and physiological adaptations of hydrophytes, and we have seen TS of hydrilla stem. Up to this I conclude my video. Remaining we will see in the next video class. God bless you. All the best children.